Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen, will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. Therefore, anyone who sets aside one of the least of these commands and teaches others accordingly will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven.
In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus confronts the old with the new, presenting us with the unchanging nature of God's law and His mission. In today's world, full of changes, updates, new trends, and regulations, His words sound almost revolutionary. Imagine trying to install a new operating system version on your computer, but Jesus says, no updates. This system has been perfect from the beginning. It just needs to be understood and used properly. Of course, He's not talking about systems from Redmond or Cupertino. Jesus did not come to abolish the Mosaic law, but to fulfill it. What does this mean? The law was given to Israel to show them how holy God is and the importance of faithfulness and justice. Jesus came to fully meet these law's requirements. Over the years, however, the law became merely a set of regulations that people began to treat as an end. Think of the modern world, where we often get lost in regulations and procedures, forgetting the essence. Isn't it similar with the Mosaic law? Jesus came to restore its true meaning. In the 8th chapter of the letter to the Romans, Apostle Paul writes, "For what the law was powerless to do because it was weakened by the flesh, God did by sending His own Son in the likeness of sinful flesh to be a sin offering. And so He condemned sin in the flesh, in order that the righteous requirement of the law might be fully met in us, who do not live according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit." Jesus fulfilled the law through His life, death, and resurrection, and His mission is more than fulfilling instructions, rituals, and regulations. It leads to the transformation of our hearts. In the year 70 AD, the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem by the Romans symbolized the end of the era of the law. From that date, Rabbinic Judaism developed. The destruction of this temple meant that the Mosaic law in its traditional form could no longer be fully observed. It is like suddenly cutting off the internet in a world where everything depends on an online connection. The temple was the central point, and its destruction showed that it was time for a new way of living with God. Jesus came to fulfill the law and offer us grace. With the success of His salvific mission, the old law loses its special role. As stated in the 9th chapter of the letter to the Hebrews, "For this reason, Christ is the mediator of a new covenant, that those who are called may receive the promised eternal inheritance, now that He has died as a ransom to set them free from the sins committed under the first covenant." God reaches into the heart and motivations of man. Let's recall situations from our lives where we perform numerous pious actions but ignore our inner desires and motivations. Jesus emphasizes that external rituals cannot change the human heart. As He tells us in the 5th chapter of the Gospel of Matthew, "For I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven." The righteousness that God expects is one that flows from a heart transformed by Christ's love. Jesus did not come to change the law, but to fulfill it and show what true holiness and God's perfection are about. To draw closer to God, we must accept His righteousness, which means the transformation of our hearts. The law does not have life, so it cannot change a person's life. But Jesus, full of life, can transform us completely. Let's consider today how we can fulfill God's law daily. Not through external forms, rituals, and ceremonies, but through love for God and neighbor, as Jesus taught us. It is love that fulfills the law. As Paul says in the 13th chapter of the letter to the Romans, love does no harm to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfillment of the law. Let us look at everything around us through the lens of love. Let us not forget that Jesus came to fulfill the law, not to abolish all its provisions. However, rituals and ceremonies are pleasing to God if they complement all the good we do in our lives out of love for God and our neighbor. Jesus' teaching is not contrary to Judaic law, but completes it. He calls us to a deeper understanding of God's principles and to live according to them from the heart, not out of compulsion. I pray that we all may draw closer to God through Christ, allowing Him to transform our hearts and make us instruments of His peace and love. May God bless us all.